We do?
Welcome.
Have a quorum, Lupita? All right,
Yes.
call to order. Consider approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Approved by Landsberg.
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. Clerk, please call the roll.
Can I go back and take roll call first before we approve the agenda, Supervisor Sandy?
You may if you're dying to.
Okay, Member Carson,
Present.
Member Cowan is absent. And we have Member Landsberg
Present.
and Member Sandy.
Present.
Thank you. Okay, now we could move on to approval of the agenda, and I believe it was moved by Member Landsberg and second by,
Dan?
Yeah. Yeah, second.
thank you. Okay, Member Carson,
Aye.
Member Cowan is absent, Member Landsberg,
Aye.
and Member Sandy.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
All right, thank you. We need to receive and file the December and February 7th meeting minutes. Does that require a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Moved by Carson, seconded, I think, by Landsberg.
Yep.
All right,
Member
clerk, please call the
Carson,
roll.
Member Carson,
Aye.
Member Cowan is absent, Member Landsberg,
Aye.
Member Sandy.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
All right, next is an action item to authorize remote teleconference, video conference meetings by finding pursuant to Assembly Bill 361. The local officials continue to recommend measures to promote social distancing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Is there a motion to that effect?
Landsberg will move it if it's the last time we can do it.
You have my sympathies.
I'll second it on that condition also.
All right, it's been emotionally moved and seconded. Would you call the roll, please?
Member Carson,
Carson, aye.
Member Cowan is absent, Member Landsberg,
Aye.
and Member Sandy.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
All right, this is public comment. It's an opportunity for members of the public to address the Yolo Animal Services Planning Agency on subjects relating to that committee's business and not otherwise on the agenda. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Sir, do we have a public comment?
Do not see any hands raised, Chair.
Okay, we've received no written correspondence. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Lupita. All right, so then we will conclude public comment. And that leads us to a presentation on Yolo County Animal Services expenditures.
Screen shared.
There you are. Ready.
Are you going to share, Joanne, or should I share?
Yes, I've got it coming up right now. Okay, are you able to see the presentation?
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
Okay, good afternoon, members of the Animal Services Planning Agency, JPA. My name is Joanne Ben Hoosier. I'm a management analyst with the County Administrator's Office. And today I'll be giving a presentation on Yolo County Animal Services expenditure trends for the past 5 completed fiscal years. So that's fiscal year 16-17 through 2021. To just quickly orient ourselves on the JPA's work plan, today is the last in the series of meetings to establish the baseline understanding of the current state of Yolo County Animal Services. And so we'll be coordinating with each of the city councils to get on the council's agenda for each jurisdiction to give a presentation to each group. And so in our previous presentations, we've looked at cost allocation methodology as well as service levels. And today we will be looking at expenses, and then that will set the stage for the JPA to move forward with developing the strategic plan and mapping the route forward for animal services in Yolo County. So today we'll be looking at costs for the past 5 completed fiscal years, and we'll have time for board feedback and information requests. If you have questions along the way, please let me know, and I'll also pause from time to time to ask for questions. Just a high-level outline of what we'll talk about today. We're going to be looking at budgeted versus actual expenses, and then looking at some expenses in more detail by category. We'll also be taking a brief look at comparisons of cost to other jurisdictions. And we'll also have some items for the JPA to consider as you move forward to the strategic planning phase of animal services. So I've got a summary. I like to do a summary sandwich. So we'll preview and then end with this information as well. But overall, budgeted expenditures for Yolo County Animal Services increased 20% over the past 5 completed fiscal years. And the increase in actual expenditures was lower over the same period. And we'll see more detail on that in the slides to come. But that was essentially due to the pandemic. We had some areas that had more dramatic changes in costs. So that would be the veterinary services contract, insurance, household expenses, and capital assets. Currently, Yolo County is spending about $14 per capita, and that's per human capita, on animal services. And I found this is comparable to other jurisdictions when I was able to find roughly apples to apples comparisons. And licensing revenues have dropped in the past 2 years, but should improve with pandemic recovery. And there's some additional actions that we could consider to further improve revenue collections. So we'll start with adopted budget versus actual expenditures. So if you recall from our previous presentation, the city's contracts with Yolo County Animal Services is based on the recommended budget. So the adopted budget is generally a little bit higher than that. And here on this chart, we've got the blue line, which is the adopted budgets for each fiscal year. And the orange line is the actual expenditures. So overall, the budgeted expenditures increased 20% over the 5-year period. As sort of a point of reference, estimated inflation over that period was about 13%. We had a couple of years where the actuals were higher than the budget. And anytime that happened, the county absorbs the overage. And then the past 2 years, with staffing vacancies, supply chain issues, closures, et cetera, the expenditures have been less than budget. And so those amounts have gone into the Animal Services Trust. So the balance of that has increased over the past couple of years, and that money is available for animal services needs as needed. And so that's where that money has gone. And as I mentioned, a couple of years it had the higher than budgeted actual expenditures that was absorbed by the county.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Sure, I don't need an exact number, but can you give me the order of magnitude of what the Animal Services Trust Fund balance is these days?
I think it's at approximately 200,000 currently.
Great, thank you.
I know we've had some expenditures out of there and some planned. So the last 2 years, the budgeted expenses have been lower than, I'm sorry, the actuals have been lower than budget, but I think we can expect once we start moving out of full pandemic mode, these will start to be closer together as they were in past years. So just breaking down actual expenses, this kind of darker reddish orangish color, the biggest one is salary and benefits. That's 60 to 70% of the overall animal services expenditures, which is pretty typical for most organizations. Where we've had some changes is the balance of salary and benefit expense versus service and supply expense. Service and supplies is this kind of yellowish middle color. So that's varied from about 30% to as high as 40% currently. And then this top color is capital expenditures. And so that has varied quite a bit over the years, from less than 1% to as much as 11% of total expenditures. So that's another thing that we'll be kind of looking at here. But over the 5-year period, actual salary and benefit expenses as a line item has actually decreased from 16-17 to 2021. And there's a couple of factors at play there. The biggest one is that 3 registered veterinary technician positions transferred from county employment to the UC Davis Vet Services contract in fiscal year 1920. There's also been some pandemic staffing vacancies, just like everywhere. And so these decreases in FTEs and vacancies have offset any inflation in salary and benefit costs over the 5-year period. Services and supplies increased 61% from about 658,000 to 1.1 million. This was largely driven by changes to the veterinary services contract cost, and there's a few other line items that we'll also be looking at in more detail. And just from year to year, the budgeted and actual capital expenditures really varied quite a bit. So they weren't consistent year to year.
Another question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I think picking this off as we go might be easier when we're looking at the slides. The conversion of 3 registered vet tech positions to the UCD contract. Now, it may not be apples to apples. In other words, you may have gotten more in additional services or something, you know, and I'm certainly open to understanding that. But did switching those outsourcing those 3 positions essentially, did that save us money, add the costs, and then of course, you know, what did we get for our money? Were we getting more for our money as well?
Certainly, just in terms of cost, you know, essentially, if we look at the decrease in the salary and benefits versus the increase in the contract cost, there was a net savings of about $100,000. And so net savings in terms of level of service, I wouldn't be able to speak to that as much, but in terms of pure cost, there has not been an increase in costs.
Thank you.
Supervisor Sandy, did you have a question?
I didn't.
Okay, all right, I'll continue to the next slide. So this breaks down those actual expenditures further by category. And so this is the services and supplies line item. So as we saw on the previous slide, services and supplies, it's this middle color that's increased from 25% of the budget in 16-17 up to 40% in fiscal year 2021. So if we look in more detail as to what makes up that category, the biggest component of cost is this navy blue color at the bottom. Sorry, my lights turned off. Which is professional and services contracts. And so the largest component of this is the UCD veterinary services contract. So the registered vet positions started for about half the fiscal year in fiscal year 1920. So that's this preliminary jump you see between 18 and 19. And then it jumps again in 2021. That's the first full year of having those positions be covered under that contract. And as I mentioned, there was a net savings due to that change. Another major component that's increased in cost is insurance expenses. So that's increased from about $21,000 a year to about $62,000 a year. And there's, you know, probably a number of factors that go in, but it would be just the increases in rates from the insurance provider as well as claims would drive those increases. And then the other item that had a significant change was household expenses. And so it's not the biggest line. It's kind of a green line, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th one from the bottom. It was kind of a little sliver the first 3 years. And then in 1920 and 2021, it increased up to $51,000. And those are costs for things like disinfectants. And so it's not surprising that in a pandemic, we had increased costs for things like cleaners and janitorial contracts. So, you know, really, it's primarily the change in the vet services contract drove a lot of the changes. It's this kind of third from the bottom brown line that is the insurance cost increase. So that's how we got from A to B there. Services and supplies. Any questions on that, on this slide?
But those insurance costs are astronomical,
Quite.
but that's consistent with other areas we're seeing as well.
That's right. It's pretty consistent, I think, countywide.
A question on the insurance, Chair. Is insurance through the YC Parmia? Is that something separate?
I believe it is the YC Premier.
Okay. Thanks.
We're all bleeding from that one.
Right, it's like, yep, that looks familiar. So there were a couple of components of cost that had bigger cost fluctuations from year to year. So that's not like the biggest dollar amount in the world, but it did fluctuate quite a bit from year to year. And that was capital asset budgets as well as minor equipment. So capital assets is this top chart. And in this case, again, blue is budget, orange is actual. So the budgeted amounts ranged from around 25,000 up to as high as 289,000, but then expenditures were everywhere from 10,000 to 287. So, not very even on the capital asset budgets. The minor equipment ranged from a low of 3,000 actual expenditures to a high of 57,000 in actual expenditures. And so one possible suggestion to consider is strengthening capital planning and replacement schedules to potentially smooth budgets from year to year.
Wow.
So we may ask ourselves, how does Yolo County Animal Services compare to other jurisdictions in terms of cost? So according to the Humane Society of the United States, estimate amounts spent by animal control organizations annually is about $34 per capita. That's everything all across the country. So in fiscal year 2021, based on the adopted budget, overall animal service expenses in Yolo County were about $14 per capita. And it's really, really difficult to get apples to apples comparisons because every county has a different patchwork of nonprofit providers versus government providers, and some are more transparent with their budgets than others. So trying to get everything on a level playing field for comparison purposes, I calculated an approximate per capita cost for Sacramento County. So that's unincorporated Sacramento plus the contract cities of Elk Grove and Galt of $14 per capita. For Solano County, which is the full county and all the incorporated cities, I came up with a per capita of $13, but I think this is slightly understated because there's a couple of other nonprofit providers, the Solano SPCA and the Humane Society of the North Bay. And the amounts spent for those jurisdictions is not included in this number. But overall, to the extent that I was able to, compare apple-ish to apples, the spending in Yolo County seemed consistent to me with other jurisdictions. And as we saw in the previous presentation, Yolo County Animal Services has, in most cases, better performance metrics in terms of live release rates than other jurisdictions. I thought I would look a little bit at the adopted budget versus actual licensing revenue, because at the end of the day, the net cost depends not only on the expenses, but what the actual revenues are. And so there was an upward trend in animal license revenues. So blue is budget, the orangish red is actuals. So we've been on a significant upward trend until 18-19 and then pandemic. And so we hit a low, well, not a low, but a several year low of $455,000 in actual animal license revenues in 1920. And it's rebounded a little bit. So I think we can expect that to improve back to historical levels as we emerge from the pandemic. And I also think there's some additional actions to potentially improve revenues that could be considered for the future.
A question again, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
In that area leading up through 1819, were there any programmatic efforts to get more people to pay, or did we do something right in that period?
And Stephanie, would you be able to speak to that at all?
I think that was when we switched our licenses to Pet Hub. So it was a new type of licensing, and we really, went to the web licensing. So doing things online. And so that's the change. And then as far as the decrease too, it's been mentioned the pandemic, but also we waived a lot of late fees based on financial hardships. So that was something that we are now not having to do as frequent, and people are having access to rabies clinics. So their licenses are now valid. So we will be headed back up in the positive direction. But yeah, it was the new type of tag. So it's the one that has a QR code and you can scan it to help locate owners. So.
And we're still using Pet Hub. So the benefit we got out of it is that's not something we discontinued after 1819, right?
No, we're not, yeah, we are still doing that, just not the metal tags. And we're transitioning a lot of people over to the Pet Hub. So that's something at no charge, but that's as people are asking for replacements, we are turning it over. I think that where we could improve, and that's something my team and I have talked about, is really pushing what is Pet Hub, like what do you get for it? So a lot of people aren't, I think, using it as well as it could be. And that's just an education piece and getting that out to the community. So.
Thank you.
Stephanie, when you waive a fee, is there an accounting for which jurisdictions are waived and the dollar amounts? Are those just taken across the board?
My guess would be that it could be done by jurisdiction. Waiving the fees, and what we really are doing is it's the late license fee. So that is, for the most part, a lot of the times that our system, it misses in the mail. So that's the ones we take into consideration. And people that are late licenses, as far as, more than 5 years, they're looking at hundreds of dollars. So we don't normally waive that many, that much, but we'll work with people on payment plans. But I'm pretty sure we could get that information to you based on jurisdiction. It should be in one of the licensing reports. So that's something I can look into.
Joanne, what do you think of tracking that data?
It's certainly something that we can look into.
Do you think it's worthwhile?
It's something where, we can see if we can get a report and we can review it and see if it tells us anything that we think the JPA would be interested in learning about.
So are those just individual decisions, Stephanie?
Yes. So
Okay.
It is. It's not a blanketed, we're waiving all late fees this month. It really is when people express financial hardship, and it's for multiple years.
Okay.
I think the way it has been for me in the past 9 years, how I saw it was, if your late penalty got waived once, that was kind of a good faith, just something that was done up in the front. And now, as things have gotten more tighter for a lot of people, it is, I tend to waive more fees for redemption versus licensing, because a license itself is only $19. But for the redemption cost to get people, their pets out of the shelter, is where we really do discount quite a bit.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Chair, I have a question for.
Yes, sir.
On the revenue streams, Joanne, are you looking at what other counties are doing, other jurisdictions, what they might be doing to up their revenue streams so we can offset the cost of jurisdictions?
It's something that I've noted in my research and travels. I believe the only county I've seen that publishes anything like performance measures is San Luis Obispo County. And I think they have a target of 40% of animals in the jurisdiction being licensed. And currently, Yolo County has about 30% of animals, by my estimates, being licensed. And that seems pretty consistent with what the correct study a number of years ago was that about 30% of animals required to be licensed were actually licensed. So it's something where staff can do additional research to see what is best practice in terms of boosting revenues.
That's a low number.
It does sound very low, but apparently it can range from like less than 1% up to 15 to 20. So 30 is actually pretty good. And I think 40 is probably the best that anyone expects to get.
Wow.
It's interesting. It's something I never knew.
Yeah.
But certainly looking at best practices to boost revenues is something that staff can do.
Thank you.
And I think I'll move to the next slide because, some of the options for enhancing licensing revenues could be considering requiring cat licenses. This is something that's not required by the state. Dog licensing is required by the state, but not cat. And so cat licensing is determined on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. So that is something for the jurisdictions to consider as a possible source of revenue. We can also make sure that we're looking at those best practices and making sure that things are as convenient and easy as possible for folks to get animals licensed. So
Is there anywhere that licenses cats currently?
Not in Yolo County.
No, I understand, but in the state,
Yes, there are other jurisdictions.
such as where?
For example, I used to live in City of Moore Park in Ventura County, and that jurisdiction required cat licensing.
Interesting.
I think it would lead to problems. People would be abandoning more cats than they already do.
And it's the kind of thing where there's sort of best practices and model legislation to make sure
You can't
that
herd cats and you can't license them.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't personally try checking a cat I didn't know for a cat. But there are ways to write the licensing requirements so that it doesn't penalize folks that help community cats. So it's just something that, if a jurisdiction did want to go that direction, that it's done mindfully.
And Richard, we license the cat owners as opposed to the cats. We can do that.
That's probably a better idea, Dan.
I'll get in trouble. I'm not wearing my tag.
Much better.
Keep going, Joanne.
Of course. So we're getting near the end of the presentation, but looking forward, expenditure budgets were increasing 4 to 8% per year prior to the pandemic. So this is a pretty reasonable estimate of annual future increases. Implementing capital plans and equipment replacement schedules could smooth annual budget amounts and ensure assets are maintained and replaced as needed. Animal services, in collaboration with the participating jurisdictions, could consider something like longer term agreements to reduce year-to-year variation. I've seen interagency agreements ranging from 2 years to 15 years. And so that's something that could be considered. And then we could consider ways to enhance licensing revenues, such as cat licensing, and making it as easy as possible to pay for licenses.
What about a graduated scale for dogs?
Tell me more about that.
Well, you pay $10 for a Chihuahua and a Bull Mastiff is 20. I mean, that's, is there any provision like that for anybody?
By the pound, in other words.
Oh.
I haven't seen that, but it doesn't mean it's not out there, but I can't imagine it would be recommended.
You can't imagine what?
That it would be recommended. It may not result in equitable fees. So, but it's certainly something that I can see if it exists out there.
All right.
It's an interesting concept. In reality, it's an interesting concept. I don't know if the public would go for it.
And
By
the
the pound.
goes with the rabies vaccination. So, charging more for different sizes of dogs wouldn't, change the prevalence of rabies because, you're probably more likely to be bitten by a smaller dog than a large one.
That's true.
And
But,
so
but I would still prefer the smaller dog, so.
you want it to be inverse to size.
Yes.
So
If you've ever been bitten by a dog, it hurts.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, ugh. So to put the top on my summary sandwich, the budgeted expenditures for Yolo County Animal Services increased 20% over the 5-year period. The actual expenditure increase was lower due to the pandemic, but those additional unspent funds went into the trust. The budgets were increasing 4 to 8% per year prior to the pandemic, so this is a good guideline for potential future year-to-year increases. And really where the cities have seen the greatest changes in their contract cost has come more from when the county and the cities agreed to that fixed versus variable cost allocation methodology. And then changes from year to year in actual usage of services. That's really what's driving the changes for the contracts. Yolo County is currently spending about $14 per capita on animal services, and this is comparable with other local jurisdictions to the extent I was able to create comparisons. And licensing revenues have dropped in the past 2 years, but should improve with the pandemic recovery and additional actions to improve revenue collection. That concludes my presentation.
Excellent, thank you.
Feedback and direction, and I'll just put the planned work plan back on the screen.
I wanted to see is there any public comment on anything that's been said?
There are no hands raised, Chair.
How about paws? Are there any paws raised? Any tails wagging? No? Okay. All right, Joanne, finish up, please.
I have a question for Joanne.
Yes, sir.
The presentation is going to be given to each city council in the next couple of months. Are you going to break down the numbers for each jurisdiction?
If the councils would like that, I could break it down in more detail for the jurisdiction specifically to tailor that for that.
I think I would, especially like in the per capita and the number of animals, et cetera, that Woodland is producing, et cetera.
Yes, absolutely.
You feel the same way, don't you, Dan?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That would be of value.
Yes, because there's, just from the data, I can see differences in jurisdictions. And so it'll definitely be I could address.
All those Davis dogs moving to Woodland.
Stephanie, did you have anything to add?
One thing that was brought up as far as the comparison for the services provided by UC Davis before we sorry, I have an office helper. That's the squeaky toy. So she is raising her hand and obviously not happy with my talking here. So I apologize. But yes, I personally would like to look into that to compare the services that we were, what was being provided prior to transferring those RVT back to UC Davis. So, I mean, I know what we go through day to day and what, they have some staffing vacancies right now. So we are seeing a decrease in what we can provide to the community. So you brought that up and I'd like to be able to really look into that, how many spay neuters we were doing. We were doing more TNR clinics for community cats and some owned animals. So that is something that I feel is important for the committee to see, and also that would show the need in each of the jurisdictions. So just that's something that I took note to do and look up that, because we have decreased, pandemic included, but we really are lower to what we should be doing and what I would like to see us doing. So as far as if we can offer more vaccine clinics, which we are looking to do, then that licensing revenue will increase. More access to those microchip clinics as well, which will decrease the animals having to come into the shelter, which will decrease the cost for the cities as well. So those are just some things that kind of you guys, the conversation and this presentation, I would like to look into that more and see about, just to show what, like you said, what you're getting for the money, but also
Yeah.
the needs of the community too. So we need to make sure that's what's being met.
Okay, will you work with Joanne on that? Please?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. All right, Joanne.
And so we'll be working over the next month or so to get on every city council's agenda to provide those individualized presentations on animal services. And we're hoping in those presentations to, collect information about each jurisdiction's priorities, to really find where we've got areas of agreement and areas where we might be closer apart and farther apart in what we're all hoping for in terms of animal services in Yolo County. And then the JPA may consider scheduling a strategic planning session to really put together the picture for the future so that staff can help with any research for mapping that forward.
So
Good.
I have some additional information I'm looking for in this process.
Go ahead, Dan.
And people who know me know not to jump to conclusions on the basis of questions I ask. I'm genuinely in a quest for information here, and I would certainly characterize myself as open-minded as to what we should be doing. One is, it's not a new issue. Some of the past analyses the staff shared with me did look at the issue of the degree to which we use law enforcement staff to deliver these services. The data you've provided me in the past indicates that different agencies do it differently. Obviously, we're all aware that law enforcement staff are very capable. There clearly is a law enforcement function that is needed here, under state law and other laws, that you have to have somebody in that realm. The question is, could we shift more of our staffing away from law enforcement, not incur such higher compensation costs, including very high pension and healthcare costs? And is it worth the disruption that could come from making a change like that in a relatively small agency? There are also economies of scale from adding it on to the sheriff's department, I'm sure. But I don't have any analysis that tells me, is that a sensible idea for us, or does it not make sense? And that's something I would like to have some analysis about. I'm still interested, and I mentioned this, a number of meetings ago. Here's this new, I've forgotten the numbers. It's a new $40 or $50 million state grant program that it so happens that UC Davis Veterinary School is playing a key role in doling out the funds. I've read a very simplistic, high-level summary of what the monies are for. And honestly, I'm not even sure what's for operating costs, what is for physical improvements. But I would like to know what we think of that program. Are there opportunities for us? You may have done all the homework already to be able to tell us, no, there's really a dry hole for us there. I'm open-minded again to what is realistic, but are there some resources there to supplement what we collectively are providing, that of course would be a one-time opportunity, obviously. I am very interested in the conversations that you've started, and the attention you've called to us to some opportunities to generate additional revenues through the different mechanisms you've raised. I'd love to get, again, just the roughest sense of the cost benefit of that, in addition to just COVID recovery, which will happen. We're seeing our sales tax revenues, for example, bouncing back. People's behavior is changing. But if staff thinks they have a particular strategy that makes sense and has a sense of what it would cost us to implement it, I mean, social media stuff is not really expensive. It's a cheap platform to drive things. And buying even Facebook advertising is ridiculously cheap. I'm intrigued if there's not a completely figured out plan, but if there's a strategy that you could put on the table that could drive revenues. And then the flip side of that is, we've talked about it on multiple meetings here. Are there things that even Davis's numbers in terms of demand for animal control services are lower than our colleagues? But the message I heard when I asked about it a couple of meetings ago was Davis could do better too, that all of us could do better. And if there are strategies, again, whether it's education strategies or other approaches that could drive down those numbers, I'm very interested in those sorts of things. The cat licensing, I'm hearing that some resistance to that idea. I would like to know more about how well it's worked out in other jurisdictions. And I'm particularly interested in, has it had besides the pure revenue side of it, has it had a beneficial impact on animal care? Which is, I think all of us feel that it's not just about the money, it's also about, are we able to provide services that make sense and help people? So those are things that would be helpful for me to hear about. And if you want to bring our UC Davis contractors in here to talk with us, I think that would be a great use of our time if they are willing and interested, both educating us about the services that they're providing for us now, but whether there are opportunities with these grant programs. I read a story in I want to say it was probably the Woodland Daily Democrat, but I could be wrong about that, about this effort they're making with this new grant effort. And if they're hanging the shingle out there and saying there's information available about what they're going to pursue, they're right here in our backyard. It'd be a great conversation to have. But anyway, I stand here ready to be educated on all of these issues, and I don't pretend that you've not thought about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Stephanie, did
That's
you have something you wanted to add? Sorry.
Go ahead, Joy.
Sorry, Chair. Would it be okay if Stephanie added her comment? I know we're after time, so if folks need to go.
Yeah, quickly, go ahead.
No, I was just taking notes, and we are part of that, the launch for it was the Cal for All Animals for UC Davis. So I was on the Facebook Live launch and in close contact with the Correct School of Medicine, trying to figure out where we would fit in. So we are definitely trying to see if that is anything that can help us. So, and would be happy to share more information.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. All right, anything else? If not, thank you for your time and your volunteer efforts. Rich, thank you for bailing us out today. Appreciate that. And then we will reconvene at our next meeting.
Chair? Sorry
Yes,
to
sir.
interrupt. We do have a hand raised. I don't know if you want to go
Oh.
back to public comment.
I apologize. Quickly, let's take them.
Okay, Eileen Sametz.
Okay, hi, Eileen.
Hi, all. I'm sorry. I did have a comment after some of the other comments made. I'm sorry I was late to the meeting. I had a doctor's appointment, so I just caught the last part of it. And the short version is we so need the spay and neuter services. The shelter is struggling, and I hope you are not all in denial of this. Is that they are doing the best they can, but I mean they need more staffing, and we need a full-time vet on site to be doing internal and external spays and neuters, or is only going to come back on the county in terms of cost. So I work with a number of different volunteer groups, including the Yolo SPCA group, with the community cat groups. And the shelter did a great job in the past before the pandemic and everything, but then they've been strapped with losing staffing and funding, and they need more. And so please, please, because it is only going to come back in costs. If the county cannot provide the spaying and neutering services and the vaccination services, which I think they've been doing the best they can with the vaccination services, but for heaven's sake, those of us, there are volunteers working in the communities to kind of keep the number of community cats down. That is the only thing that works. So please, please get the funding to them that they need and the whatever they need, because they are doing the best they can, but they're strapped. There's no question about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Appreciate the thoughts. All right, with that, I think that concludes public comment, and we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Have a great afternoon.
You too. Thank
Thanks,
you, Dan.
Myra.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Did Myra make it?
I made it. Sorry.
Wants us
Gary, I
wants
was
us to
calling
start
you.
over.
Oh, no, you're gonna start over. I'm sorry, you guys.
I got your call. I ignored it.
Yeah, I called Joanne because I looked at the time and I thought you guys were done and she ignored me. So I called you
See you next
guys.
month.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for
See you
giving it
next
the old
month.
college try.
I always will, Gary. You know
All right.
me.
Good to know.
Bye.
Yes, you do. Thank you. Thank you all.